Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
The Kinder Morgan pipeline purchase by the federal government, very controversial, $4.5 billion for a pipeline that's already been built, and people are wondering, why did they have to buy an existing pipeline? Isn't the one that's trying to be built the one that they have to buy?
Yeah, well, you can't really separate the existing one from the new one because they're basically running down the same route. And the company that owns the assets is the same company. The terminals where the intersections between the pipeline segments are common to both the old and the new, and many, many other parts of it that are in common. So separating it out is not possible. You couldn't just say, oh, we'll take over, where Ottawa will take over the new part. I think it just was deemed not feasible. So that's why it's all packaged into one. We've heard from the left, we've heard from the right, different objections to this arrangement. I used to find in the newspaper business that when you had opposing viewpoints who felt that your view was one they both didn't like, then it often was the case that you had actually nailed it pretty much on the money. You know, I think the Liberals, by earning the wrath of the left and the right, may have found a path down the middle that is going to, if not satisfy the polarized ends of it, it's going to appeal to that broad middle ground, which is exactly what they need to do.
Well, that is so uncommon, isn't it?
Well, many try for it, but few achieve it.
As they say, common sense isn't all that common. Was it a good bargain, or do you have the ability to know, was it worth 1.5, 4.5, 1.2? Was it good value for the money, or was it a case of it doesn't matter really what it costs, it needed to be done? Yeah,
well, I think the risk is they would have paid the existing asset price, which includes not only the purchase price that Trans Mountain paid a few years ago to buy it, also the cost of upgrading it. They've added a lot of new sections. They've modernized all kinds of it. You know, you think, oh, it's a 60-year-old pipeline. Well, in a sense it is, but it's been just piece by piece modernized over time. So it's a first-class 2018 asset for energy movement, and they paid the appropriate price for it. But what I think we also see in that valuation is the sweat equity of all the work they've done to advance a proposal for the expansion, the $7.4 billion expansion project, through all the regulatory processes that take forever. You know, in Texas, you'd go in to say, I want to build a pipeline, and they would say, well, when do you want to start? You'd say, well, next Tuesday. And they'd say, well, come back Monday, you'll have the permit. In Canada, it's 5, 6, 7 years, 8 years, or never. And in this case, Kinder Morgan has invested all of that effort to get to this point. That's worth something, but also the actual dollars they spent to get to the point where they have a permitted project. That's a valuable asset. It's a tradable thing. Clearly, they've recognized the value of it. And, you know, you put those things together, the physical asset and the investment in a permit, and I suspect that price they've arrived at, even though some people are shrieking that it's too much, is a fair valuation for what all that represents. Of course, there's still billions of dollars that has to be spent to build the new part of it.
Studies have been done that claim oil will suddenly be dropped, or will suddenly drop in its usage in about 15, 20 years because of all the electric cars on the road. But in the meantime, we still need something to run our vehicles. Are we looking too far in the future?
Yeah, one of these assets, a pipeline, is needed not just to move fuel for Lower Mainland drivers, because we get most of it from up there, whether it's the raw form or distilled products, refined products. It's used to create revenues today to fund the Canadian programs that we've got that people just take for granted. Everyone expects they should be able to go down to the hospital. They expect the Army's there to do whatever it needs to do when it's called upon to do it. We expect that the Parliament has the money to keep the lights on and the heat on in Ottawa, do all of these things as a country. Well, you've got to be able to pay for those things, and crude oil is actually the single biggest advantage we've got in being able to meet those demands. I know that there's kind of a popular cottage industry of people who say to everything I just said, no, it isn't. No, you're wrong. But actually, when you ask them, well, what are the facts you've got? They don't have any facts. They have an emotion that is very strong, and they wish that the truths that I have found in my research, weren't true, but they really are true. And I think as we engage with the practical problem solving and how we maintain our competitive edge as a country, and actually we're not doing that great a job of it right now, and planning for the future and our energy needs, which won't go away, they'll only increase, we have to face some of these realities that not everybody's in love with.
Andrew Weaver likes to post on Twitter this pie chart that shows that oil and gas only provide 2.2% of Canada's economic income. Is this, and it doesn't quote a source for this pie chart, it's just a pie chart.
Yeah.
Where did he get this number, and is it accurate?
Yeah, there's a kind of narrow slice of report, and he's citing one of those American-funded activist groups that is out to tell Canadians that their economy's no good and we shouldn't have resource commodities in our export mix. They spend a lot of money in our country to disseminate propaganda, and I've seen the specific report he's referring to. It is that kind of propaganda. I've looked at it, tried to make sense of it. It doesn't make sense. I mean, the fact is that our biggest single export is crude oil. It's what pays the rent in Canada. That's a quote from Patricia Moore, the former chief economist of one of the big banks, who I've had many enlightening conversations with, and it's just a fact. And I think what Mr. Weaver is trying to do, or Dr. Weaver is trying to implant a story in people's minds based on the trust that he may enjoy as a university professor and MLA, but I think he's really abusing the trust when he is so reckless in these, I would say wishful factoids that he disseminates. And he's certainly not the first to do that from that movement, but I think that ultimately it will be a reckoning for that thinking when it comes back and the facts don't prove out the way that he's forecasting, because they won't. I mean, energy is a big employer. A job in oil and gas, for example, creates more value for the economy than just about any other job can. This is not a barista job. No ill reflection on baristas. I depend on them every day. But they generate in oil and gas so much value. When one study was done in the northeast of BC, the figure they came back with was $200,000 per year in GDP value that one job in the Peace River country of BC generates to the economy. And the average job, what is that figure? It's about 30,000. So 6 times the impact on the economy from those jobs. It's pretty significant.
Well, I have a little bit of math here now. I haven't done any real hard number crunching, but right now with the high gasoline prices in Vancouver, it's not unusual for somebody to spend $70 to $150 a week on gasoline. Andrew Weaver at the same time is saying craft beer makes more money for Canada than gasoline. Does everybody who drives a car buy $150 worth of craft beer a week?
Yeah, I don't know if he's been maybe consuming that level of craft beer, $150 a week worth to have the judgment there. I've heard him say that. I was at the Chamber of Commerce a few years ago, and he said those very words. That was about 4 years ago, and I think he got his talking points about 5 years ago, and he just never bothered to refresh them, because I looked at that too, and I think what he's done is tried to count the jobs in the whole brewing industry as claimed by the brewing industry and said, look, it's the same as the number directly involved in oil and gas. And there may be a grain of truth in that, but when you look at the whole oil and gas goods and services supply chain, it is really a vast, sprawling network, a capillary network, if you will, through the whole Canadian economy, from literally one coast to the other, east to west. It is something that, because it requires so much high-tech precision equipment and expertise, I know a friend of mine, hadn't seen him for years. I reconnected with him recently, working down in Chinatown in Vancouver. What is he doing? He is creating the program for truck maintenance. Those gigantic trucks they use in the oil sands, bigger than a house? They have to be maintained. Very tricky business. And there's a programmer, I can tell you, living down there. I think one of his contractors is on one of the Gulf Islands or on Vancouver Island. And they provide that software service so that they can reliably do the maintenance. It's an amazing story, and that's just one example of the thousands of ways that this economy runs through the whole national economy. And so when we hear this from Dr. Weaver, as he frequently likes to tell us, I just know that he's not stating the facts, and I think it's rather a shame that he should feel so confident in misinformation that he wants to spout it all the time.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the U.S. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the U.S. and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
MGX Minerals is revolutionizing the new energy economy with patented lithium extraction technology, replacing traditional solar evaporation using low-cost, low-energy nanofiltration. The first system of this paradigm shift technology is currently being commissioned. MGX Minerals trades on the CSE, symbol XMG, the OTCQB, symbol MGXMF, and Frankfurt, symbol 1MG. For more information, visit our website, mgxminerals.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Stewart Muir. Stewart, what's happening in the BC salmon farming business? A lot of controversy about that. Is it a sustainable growth business?
Well, it's certainly a growth business, and all the indications I've seen are that it is probably our most sustainable industry. And it has grown probably over a 30-year period to be a major employer, especially on the North Island, where a lot of the jobs in previous traditional industries have probably declined quite a bit over the years, and so it's replaced that. But it's also, I think, more importantly, made British Columbia and Canada part of a global movement towards aquaculture and a more sustainable approach to managing the seas.
Of course, what do you do with all the salmon waste that falls to the bottom? They say it leads to sea lice and other diseases. Can they control disease, and can they control escapes? Because Washington State had a major escape of Atlantic salmon into the Pacific, and they've now brought in some pretty stringent rules. Does BC have to do the same?
Well, for many, many decades before there was salmon farming, there was an attempt to introduce Atlantic salmon to Pacific rivers and lakes, because there were anglers who wanted to seed this stock so that they could have the enjoyment of fishing them. But it was the most frustrating thing, because it is not possible to do. You cannot acculture Atlantic salmon to the Pacific. It doesn't work. And so when one escapes, or some escape from a farm, as did happen in Washington State, what happens is they, being like cows at a farm, they're looking for their next meal. They actually wait around the nets, waiting for the dinner bell. And it's very easy to catch them. There were, I think, 2 fish that escaped in all of British Columbia last year. I looked this up. It's quite amazing. And they were both caught. They were both caught right at the farms. So this idea that there are these penned up Atlantic salmon waiting to escape and take over the rivers, there's no science to that. Absolutely none whatsoever. And I think it's rather sad for First Nations and workers in Washington State, because a purely political decision made by the environmental activists who are influencing the Washington government against the science was made to remove the Atlantic salmon from Washington State waters. It was probably one of the worst, most anti-science decisions I've seen in a long time from from a government.
Is it true a lot of chefs prefer the farm salmon because it cooks up better?
Yes, especially for the consistency and serving large numbers, because if you're doing a menu, you need to be able to predict not just what it's going to be like on the plate today and tomorrow, but also maybe that will be the same menu in 6 months. Imagine if you're at Earl's and you're the executive chef, you've got to plan those menus. You want to make sure the customer's coming back, getting the same experience. You've got to make sure that there's a supply of that. With wild salmon, these are stocks that nobody knows what happens out in the ocean. We can observe salmon in the rivers, but when they go to sea, they don't have, apart from a very few experiments near the coast, there's just no tracking ability. So at this point in time, it's a bit of a mystery as to when they're going to return in large numbers or small numbers. We think we can predict some cycles, but then along comes a surprise year and it throws everything on its side. And, I've given up trying to be authoritative in that. I mean, back in 2009, the Cohen Commission was struck into the salmon problem, a decline in salmon numbers. There were concerns about aquaculture. That was 2009, so the whole federal circus of a big public inquiry took place. Well, what the salmon did? The next year, 2010, the Fraser River sockeye returned to that river in record numbers, almost like a thumb in the eye for the Cohen Commission. Hey, we haven't gone anywhere. We're still here. And it is the same to this day. There are more salmon out in the ocean than there have ever been. Believe it or not, that's a scientific fact. And I know there is a lobby group trying to get the provincial government to stop some of the salmon farming in BC, but I've examined their evidence, and they really don't have a scientific case at all. It's more emotion driven by a few people who feel a certain way that we shouldn't have salmon farming. And when you look at the evidence they present, it's not scientific evidence that's conclusive. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's very important that we have scientific regimes to manage the fisheries, because wild salmon and farmed salmon in proximity, there's management issues there that require professionals, veterinarians and scientists and research, and that has to be ongoing work. It's very, very important work. But the fact is, at this point in time, there's no scientific belief or reason for belief that should cause us to take these rather extreme actions that some people are lobbying for.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead zinc silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic Engineer gold mine in the Atlan district of northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Stewart Muir. Stewart, a big environmental conference is on its way to BC, or a resource conference. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, that would be the rfg2018.org website, resources for future generations, and it's taking place in a couple of weeks. If you go to rfg2018.org, you could get all the details. There's actually some public events, so if anyone's got kids they want to expose to the career potential or the scientific interest of the resource industry, energy, mining, water management, check out the website, because there's lots of things going on. And my group, ResourceWorks, we decided this was such a good program. We wanted to be a technical sponsor, so we've helped out with that. And it's also a major tourism event for Vancouver. There's 5,000 people, I'm told, going to be coming out for it. It starts in just a few days. And I think it is a good thing to have in Vancouver, because it represents the fact that we really are, in 2018, a resource city.
Is there one specific place, or is it spread out all over Vancouver?
It's mainly down at the convention center.
And just to reinforce, what's it called again?
Resources for Future Generations.
Does it cost anything for people to go?
No, it doesn't. There's some free events, and if you go to the website on the 17th of June from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. down at the convention center, there is a public event, and I think there'll be quite a bit of interest there. A lot of the people coming are geologists from around the world, a lot of Canadians coming out, the mineralogical specialists, I can even pronounce that, believe it or not, will be there. So those interested in minerals and rocks and things like that would I think, find it quite interesting.
Stuart, where can people go to get more information about that again as well?
Yeah, the website is rfg2018.org.
Stuart,
starts on the 16th of June.
Stuart, thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. Our very popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. And don't forget, every weekend we have This Week in Money, where we talk to some of the top financial minds from around the planet. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.